you. Hi, everybody. Welcome and thank you for being here. I just want to start off with a little intro about who I am. I'm Thyme, and I'm a moderator here at MetaFilter. It's been a real honor to be a part of the MetaFilter team in so many ways. And I'm really excited actually to be here and doing this little talk. I'm not sure everybody knows, but I am Iranian. I was born in Pakistan and immigrated to the United States as a refugee with my family as a 2-year-old. And yeah, Iran is just a very, very special place to me. And I have been once in my life and have very unique experiences that really do translate into how I view what's going on today in Iran. And you are all free to ask me any questions about that as we move forward, but I'm just going to get started. So if also just to state, if anybody has any questions, feel free to pop those in the chat or go ahead and we can get you unmuted and you can just share your questions with me. I'm happy to answer questions at the end or even in the middle. If something's confusing, feel free to just flag us down. Okay, here we go. So on September 16th, a Kurdish woman by the name of Gina Mahsa Amini was arrested for unsatisfactory hijab by the Islamic regime's morality police. What this means in Iran is basically you have your general police force, and then you have this sort of unofficial police force that patrols the streets, and they are very much in plain clothes and don't wear badges or anything like that. And they just kind of decide if a woman specifically is dressed in a way that does not comply with Islamic standards, they have the authority to pull you aside, make an arrest, or often they'll demand that you correct your clothes. So whether that's go buy some clothing to make it, comply, whether your ankles are showing or your hijab is not on right, that's all stuff that they can enforce. They do the same with men as well. Men are often shunned for wearing short sleeves or short pants. So just to give you an idea of what that looks like, it's just an everyday police force that polices people's bodies. So Mahsa Amini, her Kurdish name is Gina, and it's really important to make that distinction because Gina is a name that is not considered in compliance with Islamic regime standards. The Islamic regime demands that all citizens have a name rooted in Islam, and that is why her family likely named her Mahsa. That's going to be her government name. So often when we hear about Mahsa Amini, it's important to note that her name is Gina, and her own family has stated that, it's really important for them to acknowledge her Kurdish roots. And I say this because the Kurds are an ethnic minority in Iran. They comprise about 10% of the population, and they're often banned from speaking their own language and practicing their own cultures. And so the Islamic regime absolutely has played a very, very big role in essentially othering ethnic minorities. And so for Gina to be, for her name to not really have the same level of importance as Mahsa is pretty telling of how the regime views her and how even Iranians don't often acknowledge her actual ethnicity, which is very important to do. So to just get into it, Mahsa was brutally tortured, unfortunately, and was hospitalized right afterwards. A journalist found her there and was the one who posted the photos of her that circulated and created the uproar. And so at her actual funeral, the slogan "Women, Life, Freedom" is chanted, and there's videos of that online as hundreds gather to mourn her death. It's really important to note that that slogan as well is a slogan rooted in the Kurdish women's movement. So this was not an Iranian slogan, it is Kurdish, and that is important to honor. The original slogan is Jin Jian Azadi, and in Farsi you'll hear Zan Zindagi Azadi. So it's interchangeable, and yeah, it's just really important to bring honor to her Kurdish roots and where all of this came from. So following her death, Iranians take to the streets. Women are burning their scarves, cutting their hair. The act of hair cutting is a pre-Islamic symbol of mourning in both Kurdish and other indigenous communities in the region. So it's really, really monumental to have women who are outside of that community also cutting their hair and burning their scarves. It's a big statement to make, and it's something that has never happened before. The Iranian regime, their forces basically crack down at this point, and they begin kidnapping, torturing, and threatening protesters. The Islamic regime has been known for years to have a very, very violent approach to keeping citizens in check, essentially. And so, you know, immediately you start seeing videos and images of people, children, older people, I mean, pretty much anyone you can imagine being abused and shot at with pellets and all sorts of things like that. They definitely don't hold back, and the brutality is something that for a lot of us is unimaginable, but that's currently the state of the Iranian people. On October 2nd, students began taking to the streets as well, and they began protesting outside of their universities. So you hear Zan Zindagi Azadi all over the universities, both in graffiti, on posters, young school children screaming the slogan in the streets. At this point, the Iranian Islamic regime then begins putting in plainclothes and paramilitary forces to trap students inside the actual gates of specifically Sharif University of Technology. And I mean, these are some of the most brilliant people, the most brilliant young minds who are being treated like absolute criminals for standing up for their basic human rights. At this point, the students are being attacked and corralled into the university. There are videos of all of this. I choose not to share a lot of the violent content simply because I don't think that I personally can't consume it on a daily basis, even though I do. And also, I think that that's something that I would urge all of you to, you know, go out of your way and do that research if you're inclined to see that. I will list a couple of resources around where to get the best on the ground information in terms of what's happening, because as we know, often the media does not cover things the way that they should be covered. So that's all I'll say about that. While these protests were occurring, at the same time, the Islamic regime shut down the internet, completely shut down the internet. And that means that, I mean, I even have family back home that we couldn't hear from for a few days. And when they came out of the internet shutdown, they let us know, yeah, our apps were shut down. We couldn't get into our WhatsApp to message anyone. We couldn't call each other. We couldn't get onto the internet to like look anything up or to send out information. It was a complete blackout. That's pretty terrifying, to say the least. In addition to that, there were incidences of poisoning where students who were protesting had found out that their food at the school cafeterias were being poisoned. The students then demonstrated again, threw all of the food away, made a clear statement that they were not going to put up with that level of abuse. While all of this is happening, activists, lawyers, teachers, journalists, and artists are continuously being arrested. There are artists who posted videos of them silently, you know, protesting. And the Islamic regime is very, very good at identifying people through videos and photos and essentially arresting them. There are other incidences of hunger strikes, and several journalists have been released after enduring almost 2 months of hunger strikes. It's all still happening. I think it's frustrating to know that a lot of this is not covered by Western media, and when it is, we're unfortunately being told quite a bit of lies. So it's really important to take to other outlets. So specifically, one platform that I would recommend at the moment is Instagram. I've been finding extremely helpful resources, both direct on the ground folks who have been able to relay information, as well as other activists who are focused on amplifying the voices of the people who are currently in this, in the middle of this, what I would call revolution. In addition to Instagram, you could take to Twitter as well as TikTok. I've just found that Instagram has been the most informative for myself. So back to the timeline. On November 2nd, Iranian parliament then calls upon the judiciary to issue death sentences for those arrested at protests. At the moment, there has been one official execution. This is not anything new. I remember as a young teenager hearing about men and women being executed for pretty ridiculous things, whether it was speaking badly upon the supreme leader's name, or women being caught, women who are actually queer women being caught with their partners and with their community. There's a lot of violence that has continued to happen throughout the years that most folks have never heard about. None of this is new. This violence and this brutality has unfortunately been deeply ingrained into the regime's practices. On December 5th through the 7th, so very recently, Iranian truck drivers, oil workers, and laborers actually took to a nationwide strike. About 50 cities were involved. And in this strike, the slogan has been, "We don't buy, we don't sell." So a lot of these folks are extremely underpaid and really do rely on their jobs to get by, to get through. However, nobody has continued to work at this point. There is some information going around that all of the ports and all of the containers that are meant to be transported across the country are still sitting where they were dropped off. It's a really big statement to make, to say that not only are students taking to the streets and protesters are willing to lose everything, but to have the actual specifically men who are running this workforce, who are really running the country and making things happen, are the ones who are standing up and also resisting. Present day, the internet has been shut off for the last few days, on and off, and crowds have taken to Meydan Azadi, which is the Freedom Tower. Freedom Tower is ironically a huge tower that is a big tourist attraction, and it's meant to represent freedom, but unfortunately we know that that's not the case. As of now, folks have shut down the freeways and have just completely surrounded Meydan Azadi. And we do know that the IR is unfortunately directly shooting into crowds at the moment. So that's what's happening right now. I have some images here that I wanted to share. So Meydan Azadi is the image on the far left, and it is a really beautiful statue that I want you to imagine all of the people, the masses that are taking to this Meydan right now. Additionally, on the image to the far right, that's an image I found in regards to the strikes. And yeah, nobody's buying anything. People are basically deciding that they're going to hold off and essentially shut down the economy until they have access to the proper economic, support that they've been requiring for years. And then in the middle, this was a weekly update that I got from one of the sites that I'll show you all. This is dated December 1st, and that was day 77 of these uprisings. The total death toll has reached 462. 64 children have unfortunately died. And as you can see, there's a bunch of statistics around how many universities have been involved, 157 cities, and there have been 1,118 protests already to count. So pretty big stuff. I'm going to share a piece that I found from, it's an Instagram account called From Iran, and they are a really great resource that I would urge everybody to follow and circulate their posts if you can. They have been really, really pivotal in getting the media's attention at the moment. So there's a diary entry that I'm going to read because I find it to be super sentimental and special. So here we go. This is from A. Their high school faculties have shared the keys to the rooftop and the back door with everyone, so if students are attacked, they can escape from there. They have also coordinated with the neighbors. I feel so bad for the mothers and fathers worried for the resistance as well as their children's safety. I hope you burn in this fire, IR, along with all of your mercenaries. This was posted right when the students of Sharif University were corralled and locked into their gated school. And so I've seen videos of faculty members, secretly supporting their students, doing their best, resisting when they can. And this is just one of those moments to imagine, that your faculty member is sharing a key, with the students so that they can escape in the case that they're trapped again. It's just so both upsetting and also gives me a lot of hope to know that folks are really banding together. And on the right, we have another image. It's the right to learn with no hijab. So these are young schoolgirls practicing their form of resistance, which is walking around with their hijabs down. Girls from the young age of 7 are expected to wear hijab. When I visited Iran at the age of 10, I was terrified, and so wore my hijab at all times. But that didn't stop my mother and I from being stopped and harassed by the police when I was there. And yeah, as a 10-year-old, it can be very jarring to somehow be shamed for, a little bit of your hair sticking out of your hijab. So that's the current reality for some youngsters there. And then lastly, I have some resources here, and I really would love if all of you would take the time to look into these folks. This is definitely not all encompassing, but these are just some of my favorites. Like I said, I take to Instagram for most of this. However, a lot of folks do have Twitters and other platforms. In terms of art, Mina Jafari is a really talented artist who does a lot of visual graphic design and artwork that I found to be absolutely beautiful. Ajam Media Collective is also a Middle Eastern media group that focuses on Iran and other places in the region. It's a great way to educate yourself on the history and the beauty of the culture in the Middle East. Hushidar Mortazai is a Iranian trans fashion designer and multimedia artist who is absolutely the most incredible human on this earth, and I would absolutely give them a follow. They also have been doing an incredible job circulating a lot of information, and they have reached a lot of celebrities, a lot of big public figures in the United States, which is always very helpful. In terms of breaking news and updates, 1500 Tasveer on Instagram. This is purely, this is all videos that they're getting, and they're gathering these videos from people in Iran who are sending them through WhatsApp and other places. All of this content is in Farsi. It's not translated. It's one of the biggest sources of video evidence being circulated. the actual videos are extremely violent and upsetting. They can be very graphic, so I would definitely proceed with caution on that one, but it is such a brilliant page. I believe they have following into the millions right now, which is really, really powerful. Middle East Matters, also a lovely Middle Eastern online journal where you can get same kinds of resources that I really urge you to look at. And lastly, for culture and education, some of my favorites are Chai in Conversation, where you can learn common Iranian slogans, protest slogans, as well as just Iranian language and culture stuff, which is really fun. Ozi Ozar is a queer, non-binary activist based in Berlin. They've been directly contacted and harassed by the IR undercover cops in Germany, and that is not something unheard of, unfortunately. At the moment, they are still posting and taking to the internet to make it known, but yeah, they're a really awesome person to support. And finally, we have the Collective for Black Iranians, another page that I absolutely love. They cover topics from across subjects, including the dynamic of race and ethnicity in Iran, as well as gender and sexuality. And they are also doing pretty frequent updates on the current state of things in Iran. So that is all I have. I did want to see if anybody had any questions. I know I ran through a lot of information. This was a very impromptu presentation, and I do hope that you all learned something from it. But yeah, I'll be here for quite a few minutes if anybody has any questions or comments. But yeah, anybody have anything?
Sarah Martin has a question. Are there places to donate or ways to help from here?
Amazing question, Sarah. So that is a little tricky, mostly because what happens is that the Iranian government and Western banks, unfortunately, are not, it's almost like there's an incompatibility. So you can't actually send money directly to people in Iran. I do know of some human rights organizations who are receiving donations. It's just very hard to track where that money is going in terms of transparency. So that's something that I'm really looking into individually right now. I can definitely find some resources and send those over. But as of now, I don't actually have a great place to donate funds, mostly because, yeah, the censorship is so heavy that you can't just, donate to someone's GoFundMe or Venmo or, get someone's bank account. So at the moment, I don't have a resource for that, but some of these actual folks, like I believe Middle East Matters and Collective for Black Iranians has some resources on donating. And if not, feel free to reach out and we'll find something. But yeah.
Laz has a question. Is the morality police the official police force of the IR, or is it a self-appointed group of people?
Yeah, they're actually not considered official. So the IR has their official police force who walks around, in uniform with their badges and all their equipment. And then the morality police are actually self-appointed often it's by the local governments. And when I say that, I mean, it's so loosely a government. Oftentimes it low-key is, they're like their own little gangs, unfortunately. So it's like, a leader of a police force saying, okay, here's who we're going to appoint for our morality police. And they could just be family members or people who are basically in alignment with enforcing the Islamic regime's policies. A lot of times women too, you'll see a lot of women who are on board with this. And so the morality police will include a lot of women who walk around and do this exact same thing in plain clothes. And there's really no level of accountability for them, right? Because they're not official police officers. So they get away with a lot. Yeah. Any other questions or follow up on those things?
I have a question meanwhile. So where do you see this going? Yeah.
Where do I see this going? So I like want to emphasize how unique this moment is. The last time there was a major, nationwide level of protest or uprising was in 1979. And that was actually the 1979 revolution that actually put in power Ayatollah Khomeini, who is essentially the Islamic supreme leader. So at the time, people were extremely disgruntled by the Shah. And the Shah was like our king, basically. It was dictatorship, but it was a little bit romanticized. At the time, people were starving and really unhappy with the way that he was running the country. So they took and protested, and somehow Ayatollah Khomeini found his way into power. And that was the last time anything like this had happened. So in this moment, I think that people are realizing that old regime is no longer serving anyone, and I think that folks are going to continue. It's been about 80 days now. And I don't see that ending. I think that this is going to be a pretty historic moment in terms of how long folks are going to continue resisting. I don't think people are going to go back to not resisting, if that makes any sense. So I'm hopeful. It might take years for, any really major regime changes, but I think that, I think a lot of people are just sick and tired, and this is going to be a generational thing. I think, you have elderly folks and young children at this point who are realizing what they deserve. So I hope things change in the next few years.
I guess I then have another question as well. Like, what do you think was, I mean, Gina in a way was like a catalyst, right? Because I don't think what happened to her was something new in the sense that the morality police has been doing probably, right, this kind of thing on a regular basis. So why now? Like, what do you think made everything come to a head like this? And why do you think this kind of sparked everyone turning into like this big social movement?
That's a really good question. I asked myself the same thing as things were unfolding. I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually taking, people are actually responding to this. Iranian people are upset, are enraged. And I think what really happened was not only that her photo managed to make it to the internet. I mean, I can't emphasize how often young women and men, especially queer people in Iran, are abused and disappear quite frequently. The regime is really, really good at stifling any level of external communication. So as soon as someone is beat up by the police, or as soon as someone disappears or ends up in jail, they find all of the family members, they find all of the cellular devices and threaten people to the point of silence. I think in this situation, what happened is that there wasn't a journalist, and I wish I knew her name. She actually followed Gina's family into the hospital and was the one who took the photo of Gina and immediately posted it and started sending it around. And I think that was like a huge thing. Additionally, I just think that Iranian people over the years have truly just grown fed up with the level of abuse and the amount of police brutality that they encounter on a daily basis. And so I think for people to see this young woman who was on a trip with her family and ended up, in a hospital because her hijab was like worn loosely, I think people were just like, this is enough, you know, how many more times can this happen? And it's what's so saddening is how many people can say they know family members who have been in similar situations. I think every Iranian person can say that they have a story or they had a direct experience with it. So I think it was just the last straw for a lot of people, and being able to put that on the internet was a huge impactful thing, to know that people could actually be heard because other folks outside of Iran are able to access that information too, provides a lot of hope. So yeah. And thank you for that question. That's all I have. If there's no more questions, we've hit time. So happy to hang out. But yeah, thank you all for being here. This is very special to me, and I'm very lucky to have been able to do this. So thanks for stopping by. Thank you. Bye, everyone.